What is up? Matt Pratt here. Today we're going to do a different kind of video, and the kind of video we're going to do today is going to be a tutorial style video, and it's a tutorial style video on buffing. The reason why I want to do a tutorial style video on buffing, not just buffing, cutting and buffing, like wet sand, wet sanding your clear, cutting a layer of it off, making it as smooth as possible, and then polishing it up to a shine. The reason why I want to do a video like that is because there was a time where I searched the internet left and right trying to find a good video, and then I couldn't find a good video. And I'm sure there's plenty of ones. I just suck at searching. I just suck at YouTube, period. But anyways, I'm going to do my own video. Kind of held up on materials on the Porsche. I'm waiting on some sandpapers to come in, and I painted this hood for a friend of mine last week, and it is dried, air dried enough, and is hard enough for us to cut and buff. So I'm going to do a video on my way of doing this. And I'll tell you this, that I have talked to a lot of painter friends. I've talked to a lot of people on the internet trying to find out what is the best way for cutting and buffing. Everyone has their own products they use, their own ways they do, and so on. I have developed my own. Even last year when I went to SEMA, I went to every single company's booth that had anything to do with compounding and polishing, cutting and buffing, and I just wanted them to show me their ways of doing it. What did they recommend? And I put together my own step process that's probably no different than everyone else's. It's probably pretty basic, but I was never able to find one this basic on the internet, so that's what I'm doing today. So alright, and before we get to work here, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this video, because I do a video every single week. This is going to be my 15th video straight. So alright, well, let's get to work. So first thing we're going to do is clean this entire panel off with some glass cleaner, and then we're going to get out our sandpaper. Right, so here's a couple things that I use whenever I'm wet sanding and buffing. I got a couple different assortments of sandpaper. Here I have a couple different polishing pads, and I'll go through which ones that are my favorite. A couple different compounds. Got glass cleaner, I got water. I actually even use a solvent degreaser, but I don't see it here. We have this thing here, which is an orbital polisher. That helps out a lot too. Some of my products I like to use are Wizards, and I do there's the solvent cleaner, and I do compound it. I do use 3M and Wizards together, and I'll explain why. Probably something they don't recommend, but it is what it is. It works for me. Here's a new terry cloth towel. I got a couple mini polishing pads for my mini buffer. Light. This is like a little light I made from some Amazon products that have broke on me. This used to be a floodlight stand, and this used to be some LED strip lights, and I just comboed them together. I eventually want to I have like 3 more of these. I want to make a whole row, 1, 2, 3 of LED lights, and it's adjustable at height and everything, so that helps out a lot. So alright, first step is we're going to get out our sandpapers, and we're going to start denibbing this thing, and we'll go through what sandpaper is going to use for that. So I like to actually use to denib a 1500 dry. The reason why I like dry sanding over wet sanding when it comes to like a large dirt nib is because you actually get into a couple strokes of sanding this, and it'll be highlighted in the dust and how you sand it, and I'll show you. So we just do a couple back and forth strokes right there, and you can definitely see the piece of dirt highlighted now because you've sanded the high spot, and it's made it hard to sand around the area, so it leaves a little shiny ring where your sandpaper haven't touched it. So now, of course, if you're trying to do this by hand with your finger and a piece of sandpaper, it won't highlight as well, just because the surface that you're sanding with isn't as flat. So a couple strokes going back and forth. Definitely want to do a cross motion. Definitely don't want to just sand in one way the entire way. Go every way possible. It's just like blocking for primer. And eventually your piece of dirt you're sanding that will disappear. Now I can feel it. I can just barely feel it, so I know a couple more strokes and it should be gone. there it goes. All right, so every little piece of dirt on this hood, I'm gonna have to take care of by hand. As you can see, I sanded every piece of dust that I could find. Any piece of dust, dirt, or trash, I sanded out, and I used this 1500 grit dry on this thin Durablock. And the reason why I use a thin one is because, as you see, this hood has a little bit of curve to it, so I needed a block that could give. You definitely have to use a block if you want your surface to look as flat as possible. So the next step to this is I actually wet sanded by hand with 2000 and on the same block, and this time I'm looking to get my 1500 grit scratches out, and I want to take this peel down a little bit and make it a little flatter. It also cuts the top of the surface off so we can get rid of this little haze that I have going on here, and that will be the second step to really getting the deepest shine that we can out of this clear. So let's get to work. Alright, so I already started wet sanding a little bit. And how do you know if you wet sanded enough with 2000? Because obviously when you're wet sanding, as you can see, you can't see anything. A lot of guys just go off a feel. Every once in a while, like when you've done a surface, what you ought to do is blow it off or squeegee it off just to get it dry, and then blow it off to get it really dry. And you can see here, if I can get the light in it really good, that like in this area here, I didn't go, I needed 2000 more. And around here, I needed 2000 more. All right, over here looks pretty good, maybe a little bit more here and here. Now, one of the things when you're wet sanding, just like you can't see the surface you're doing, you can't see your edges either. As you can see, I stay away from the edges for the most part. Most of my edges float out pretty good. I might touch them by hand here and there, but I definitely don't want to be leaning on it, you know, trying to make the edges flat too, because what's going to happen is you're going to burn through this way faster than you can burn through this, just because you're at a higher point right here. So stay away from your edges. Anyways, so I'm going to go back over these surfaces and continue wet sanding. Alright, so we have the hood all blocked out and 2000 grit. If you look pretty close, you can see that I wanted to come nowhere near this because I didn't want to risk burning through, and it actually flowed out pretty good on there. A lot of my edges, you can still see it shine, you know, because I just didn't want to go near the edges. Not worth the risk. It's really smooth. I can't feel any kind of dirt poking through. There's a couple spots that could use a little bit more sanding, and I'm going to do those in a second. One of the little tricks that I do is I actually soak a rag in water and I just leave it up there, and I can wet any surface instead of like trying to keep dunking and dunking and dunking. I also use this rag to wipe off the bottom of the wet sandpaper, because sometimes you can get a little clogged up with your clear coat. So another thing to mention too is there are 4 coats of clear on this thing. Like, I really laid on a lot of clear. I expected to wet sand it. I was expecting a little more dirt, a little more bigger pieces of dirt, and to actually wet sand it more, just so I had enough film thickness on there. There was really no chance of burning through, and it leaves enough thickness to be durable to like UV rays and stuff like that. Yeah, you definitely have to have a certain thickness on here. It can't be too thick and it can't be too thin. You can actually make the surface so thin that the UV rays coming from the sun can actually eat the clear and attack the base coat. Then you'll have issues where it's fading or your clear is breaking down and coming off, and other situations like that too. So to prevent that, you always put on 4 coats, 3 to 4 coats of clear. Just, you know, wet sand as much as you need to, not really trying to go overboard with it. Alright, the next step is to actually use 3000 grit, and you can see it's circled because I'm going to put it on my 6-inch DA. This is a 3M product. It's called Trizact. It says it on there, and it actually sands the panel with 3000 grit. Just makes it a little bit easier to compound. There are guys out there that will just literally start buffing from 2000 grit up, and it works. I used to do it. I used to do it from 1500 back in the day. But 3M put out these 3000 and 5000. I even think they have 8000 now. But 3000, 5000 work, and it just makes the compounding part a little easier, and it's not too long of a step. Actually sanding with 3000 grit makes your compounding step a lot quicker. This takes like literally no time to do, so let's knock this out. Okay, we have just finished up 3000 DA wet on this hood. Still use a wet rag. What I like to do is I'll make a pass going this way with the DA, and it will leave like a little sud trail. And if you can see it, what that little trail is the actual clear coat being sanded and just, you know, working its way out of the edge of the DA. And I like to wipe that off. And then I'll make another pass going the opposite way. And that's the way I'll work the hood. Now usually I'll do 3 passes. I'll do up and down, and then I'll do across, and I'll do up and down. And that's usually good enough to get out any 2000 grit scratch. Remember, we started out with 1500 because if we were to use 3000 to take out a piece of dirt, it would take forever. So we used 1500 to be quicker, then we used 2000 to get our 1500 scratches out, also to sand out our peel, and now we got to get our 2000 scratches out. So that's why we use 3000. And the next step is we're going to use 5000 to get our 3000 grit scratches out. And like I said, the only reason for 3000 and 5000 nowadays is it just makes it easier to compound. So, given that, let's get started and knock out our 5000 grit step. And that's what 5000 looks like after I've dried it off. I'm trying to look at it and get the shine in it to see if there's anything that I missed, but I don't think there is. I think everything looks really good. You can see that after hitting it with 5000, it actually starts to like put a little bit of shine on it. I still have a little bit of peel in it, but I actually like my surfaces with a little bit of peel. Like, I don't like to make them like super flat. I mean, I just think paint jobs look good with a little bit of peel. And plus, I don't think the rest of the car has been wet sanded and buffed, so we want the peel to kind of match. But I definitely took a good top layer off that's going to help us give a nice deep gloss to it. So now that we've gotten all of our 15, 2000, and 3000 scratches out, the next step is to finally compound. And then we get to go over all that. Alright, now we're down to the compound phase, and the compound that I like the most is Wizards And Wizard says it can remove up to 12, 1500, 2000 good scratches. It can, it probably takes forever though. Using 3000 and 5000 helps speed the process up. The first pad that I like to use is a wool pad, and there are different types of wool pads out here. Here's America wool pad. It's actually considered twisted wool. It almost feels like a yarn. And this is more of a fine wool. This pad works fine, but this one does a way better job. This has a little bit more of an aggressive cut. So anyways, we're gonna start with this. After this, I usually go to a foam, and I'll explain those in a little bit. So we're gonna use Wizard's Mystic Cut, and we're gonna use our America twisted wool pad. So, as you can see, we instantly have a shine restored. Now this shine that you see could be deceiving because most compounds have a little bit of polish in them and fillers. That's what we call it, fillers. And they can make it look shiny at first. So you definitely have to make a couple passes. I think I made about 4 or 5 passes on this. Before I even started to buff, I had to clean the compound pad. And what we use for that is I use a spur, which is kind of old school. Some guys take an air blower to it to knock all the old pieces of compound off. So your buffer always runs clockwise, and you want it to pull off the panel. In other words, you want it to spin this way off the panel, because if you try to spin into it, onto the panel, what's going to happen is it's going to want to, you're going to have a better chance of burning the edge here. So always make it pull off the panel. Pulling on the panel is going to heat up the edge too much, you might burn through. Alright, and then I just make a couple passes, going back and forth, going back and forth. I'm running about 1500 RPM right now. They say you can run it at 1700 plus. I don't know how accurate this buffer is. 1500 for me sounds pretty good. And this buffer, I am a cheap ass, and this buffer is actually from Amazon. It's about 70 bucks. This is not a $300 buffer. Now I do expect it to break, and when it does, I'll buy a nice one. But as for now, it's doing the job. So, all right, let me get back to compounding with this wool pad. All right, we pretty much got the half of this hood already done. See, the center of this pad has the majority of the compound on it, and when I hold the buffer flat, it's going to spin. It's going to have contact here and here. On these edges, they kind of round up just because of the shape of the pad. And when I see an area where I'm trying to cut really hard, I'll actually keep contact right in the center here. So my compound is actually working completely in a circle, and that's where I'll probably get the most cut from. And I'll go pretty slow. I'll work it pretty slow so it's really cutting in that area. And then what I'll do is I'll actually tip it on edge, and I'll start to use the round part. Now, the higher you tip this up, the smaller the area you're going to be compounding. So then that's when I'll keep my pressure, I'll pull my pressure away, and then that's what will give me the final gloss and really start to pull the buffer away. The more you press and the more center of the compound you use, the more cut you'll get. The more higher on edge, the less contact of an area you'll have, and the more concentrated on the edge, so you'll really get the panel nice and hot. And when you do that, swirls will go away, and you'll really start to see the gloss come through. Alright, let's knock out this other side. So we're going to switch to our 3M foam pad. Little magic trick I did there, you gotta karate chop it. This foam pad is pretty beat. Looks like this side would be the better side. So I'm going to hit this thing with a spur, and then I'm going to use, where is it at? This is a 3M compound. It's a lot thinner, you can hear it. They make a extra cut. This isn't the extra cut, it doesn't say EX on it. So it's just regular rubbing compound. It's kind of a step in between the Wizards and the Wizard polish that I'm going to use. So is it a pointless step? Not really. I'm telling you, it adds to the gloss. Just having the wool pad, you know, spin around there for a little bit. Then you got this, which is kind of like a finer cut, spin around on there. It really helps to it. So let's go knock this out. It's actually kind of a quick step, just because the Wizards does such a good job of cutting itself. Alright, as you can see, this gloss is getting deeper and deeper looking. The foam pad was a quick step. It's just to ensure that I'm getting the most gloss that I can out of this thing by using a finer compound with a finer cutting pad to ensure that this depth that we're looking at right now is going to stay. Really good. So the foam pad, as you can see, it's got some texture to it. They don't make this texture for nothing. You know, as you apply pressure, this thing flattens out and you get full contact with the foam. Now as you're polishing and it's getting shinier and shinier, relieve pressure, then just these little fingers start touching these little high points. That helps get rid of swirl marks, and it's almost like massaging the clear coat. So here's another type of foam pad. It's kind of like the same thing. These contact areas are a lot bigger, but you know, as you apply pressure, you get more pad. As you relieve pressure, you get less pad, and it helps get all your swirls out. So anyways, it's always good to add a foam pad in between your wool and polishing steps. So let's knock out this other side. All right. We have finished foam padding this entire thing, and it looks pretty damn good. Now you see me wiping this panel down. Between every step, you should wipe it down with a microfiber. This step's pretty important because we're about to polish, and you see this like little bit of dust right here. We don't want compound dust on the panel when we're trying to final polish this thing. What could happen is that you could be compounding, because you've got it rubbed into the panel. So you definitely don't want to do that. Definitely microfiber in between every step, from wool padding to compounding with a foam pad to polishing, microfiber in between every step. Same thing with sanding. So, all right, I already got the polishing pad switched over. This is a 3M pad. So I like the waffle style on it with these small fingers, we'll call it. And I really like to use Wizards Mystic Polish. This stuff looks pretty damn good. It has some kind of exclusive super nano abrasives. Oh, freaking know. It says you can use it with a wool pad and a foam pad. It's crazy. I don't know. I just use it with the softest foam pad that they make. All right, let's get started on this. Alright, so this is it. This is our deep gloss here. This is final step done on half the hood. I still have the other half to do, but this is how it looks, man. Like, I wonder if I can do a before and after or something. Pretty much when I did this, you only need a little bit of polish. It goes a long ways. There's a couple different ways you can do it. You might have seen I might have spread the polish out, and sometimes you can let it kind of dry a little bit, and then you come back with the buffer and you really work it in there. I was really going slow, using full contact, not leaning at all, so it was like getting full rotation, really working the polish in. I did that, spread a coat over it and kind of let it dry a little bit. Started coming back to this side, and then I would just kind of at a higher speed relieve some pressure from the pad and just let the fingers do the work. We're almost done. Now I can do this last side, and we should be good to go. All right. There it is. This thing is pretty much done. I'm gonna pull it in the booth just so we can get some really nice light on it. Look at that shine. That looks pretty good, and I'm pretty sure it's not gonna have any swirls or anything either, so I really won't be able to tell until we get it outside, but these lights in here do not lie. They show everything. But that is a really, really good gloss. All right, that is pretty much my basic way of cutting and buffing a freshly painted panel. Of course, other scenarios will call for other techniques and so on, but pretty much that is just the way I do it. Anyways, I'm done here. I got to edit this video. So if you're a first-time viewer, check out my other videos. I'm doing stuff every single week. And like, share, and subscribe. I'll see you later.